6 real estate buying hacks, poor mindset versus wealthy mindset. How the wealthy actually buy real estate, not the way most people are taught. Well, the unfortunate reality is that most people buy real estate with a poor mindset. They're afraid of the debt. They focus only on the price and the cap rate. They hope that the market will somehow save them. Wealthy people think differently. They do not buy properties. They buy control, cash flow, and an exit strategy. So today you will see how the same property can be a bad deal or a very powerful asset. Why a good deal on a paper often becomes a problem in a real life, and how wealthy investors think before they buy, not after. Hack number one, buy real estate for control. So a retail question, so the poor mindset question is how much rent can I get? Wealthy question, who controls the asset? Who controls the debt? Who controls the tax outcome? Why? Because control equals options. Options equal wealth. And obviously, you're not just buying the real estate just for the heck of it, but you want to ensure that you create wealth and you make money out of that. So here's an example. If you are owning your business, medical practice, building, and instead of paying rent forever, giving tax benefits to a landlord, building a zero equity, you can actually pay rent for yourself, deduct expenses by build equity, control your environment, and lock long-term occupancy. So same payments, completely different outcome. So here's some hacks if you are doctor, medical professional, med spa owner, or even just simply looking to purchase a building for your own business as an investment property. So there is different special loans. So in this particular case, I'm going to be talking about medical practitioners because there is a lot of different programs that are available for them. Most doctors do not realize that, but the banks led to you differently. Why? Stable income, recession-resistant profession, and lower perceived risk. So what I mean by that, so typically when you buy the investment property, so typically you need to give at least like 20 to 30% down payment. Usually it's 30%. But if there's special programs, there's special programs, and some banks have very good programs. In fact, I'll tell you, I had a couple of clients that through Bank of America, there is a special program for the medical professionals. Also the SBA loans, they give a very good, so where you can give from 0 to 10% as a down payment versus giving 20%, 25, or even sometimes 30%. So there is no PMI. So as many of you probably know, whenever you purchase primary residence, if you do not give 20% as a minimum down payment, then you have to buy the PMI insurance, which is completely waste of money, but it's an extra expense and a quite large expense. Also, at the same time, they give a higher loan limits and flexible debt to income ratio. So, and this is used for medical office buildings, mixed use properties, and sometimes residential investments too. So how would it work? Like in the real case example. So let's say if you're purchasing a building of 1.5 million and you're giving a down payment of 10%, which comes out to 150,000. Instead of giving a traditional 20%, which is 300,000. So basically you are keeping an extra $150,000, which becomes liquid, and liquid cash, extra money equals control. So you always want to keep down to more of your cash. In this case, if you can give 10% down payment, so give 10% down payment, even though you still have to pay the mortgage. Why? Because you want to take this extra money, if you have them, this extra 10%, like in this case, 150,000, and then use them to purchase another building. So if you have a possibility to do that, the only thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to over leverage yourself. You also can get the money, extra money for the equipment purchase. So some banks do that. I know Bank of America, like I said, they do this. So I actually had one of the clients, dentist. So he purchased the practice, and then besides the mortgage that he received on the property, he also was given a capital to buy the equipment and to do the renovations, so he can open the doors and start seeing the patients. SBA gives these loans as well. We actually had another client. We do have another client. Not had have another client in construction, so he actually did the same thing. So like depending which kind of business, there is different types of programs. So he was able to get the SBA loan for the construction for the property, and then at the same time for the equipment as well. So this is just something that I also wanted to mention about it, because the most common mistake is that I will pay cash for the equipment. No, the wealthy strategy is to finance equipment, buy real estate, and then deduct both. Second hack is the cash flow, not just the cap rate. Most buyers obsess over cap rate and miss the real math. They use brokers provided cap rate, ignore real expenses, and skip stress testing. So the real thinking, the problem is that the cap rate is let's say in this case 6%, so it's a good deal, without asking what is the real expenses, what if the cost rises 10 to 20%, what cash flow after that. 6% cap rate can quickly become 4%, or even sometimes in negative cash flow. So, and I'll show you in this particular, I mean, the reason I'm talking about 6% of this is because I will show you this real case study, how it actually happened after the started analyzing and the real expenses, the debt, and all of this. So this is the wealthy thinking. So I'm sharing with you, this is the Grant Cardone's thinking. This is how he looks at the deals. And the way he looks at the deal, the number one is the cash flow first. Income must be strong and predictable. And a lot of, I see like there's so many deals out there, and I'm sure that you've been presented and you heard, you see deals, and when they tell you, oh, there's 20% return on your investment, 25% return on investment. What's important is like this is all projected. It doesn't mean that you're going to be getting all these real numbers. So that's why it's very important to calculate what is the cash flow that you're going to be receiving. So cash flow, meaning that when you buy this property that you're investing in, like from the day one, or maybe like a month, 2 months, like what is the cash flow that will be left for you to take home. So it depends like on the turnaround of the property. So obviously depending again like on what type of property, if it's like already stabilized, there's a cash producing property, or you need to do evaluate, like if you need to do some kind of renovations. But then again, you want to make sure that within the first 6 months, you will be receiving this cash flow. Also, why is that important? Because cash flow, this is something you can take home. Or this is something that you can build up and then reinvest it back into the same, let's say, investment to make it better, value add, or to buy other properties. So that's why cash flow is very, very important. Scale and unit count. So the bigger properties, they reduce risk and increase control. So this is why I love to buy all these multi-families, because I spread up the risk. So if you're buying like single property or single house, then the risk is 100%. So if you buy 2 properties, one of them stops paying you or the tenant leaves, so then now your risk is 50%. So you see, like the more properties you have, the more units you have, this is how you spread the risk. Income replacement, how fast it replaces earned income. Long-term debt, fixed rate, assumable when possible. So if you're buying with the debt, it's actually very important to look at too. So if you're buying the big properties, so if it's like a single unit, it's pretty simple. But typically, if you're buying multifamily, so there's different types of debts. So there is a variable debt, there's a fixed rate. So the variable might give you the possibility to pay the lower rate today, but then it fluctuates, it will change. The fixed rate, it's something, like today, let's say if you get the property, it's 7%, and you're thinking, wow, it's so much, it's a lot. But then at least it's a fixed, and you need to worry about it going up. And why is it important? I mean, like I'll tell you from my own experience, this is one of the properties where unfortunately lost the money. That was exactly because of that situation. So in 21, we purchased that. If many of you remember, the debt was very, very cheap. So we had an interest rate of like 2.5%. Everything was great until the rate started going up. So whenever you typically buy like this big property, multi-family, you keep them for a certain period of time. So typically it's like 5 years, 7 years, and even more. So no one realized that the rate will go so fast up, and and besides that, the rate started going up, the value in the property went down. So this is when we got stuck with the property. So for 2 years we were keeping the property. So the rate started from 2.5%, it went all the way to 8%, and then we were able to keep the property. So what happened is that instead of us, like all the cash flow, you see, that's another reason why cash flow is important. So all the cash flow that the property was generating, so basically we were giving back to the bank to pay for the mortgage. But then at some point we had to sit down and face with the decision, okay, what do we do next? We were not able to refinance because the value of the property went down. So in order for us to refinance, that meant that we needed to bring more money from our pockets. So you see, that's why I was talking about like the leverage. So in that case, even though we gave 20% down payment, but because the value of the property went down, so you see, like we over leveraged ourselves. So in order for us to refinance, like we needed to bring more money from the pocket. So that was one of the things. Or another thing, okay, but if we're gonna keep the way it is, that means that now that the cash flow is not even enough to cover the rate because the rate went up. So that's why we made the decision to sell the property because there was just there was no point for us to hold on to that. So that's why you see, like, it's very important too whenever you underwrite, like, to go through all of this. Market fundamentals, population growth, jobs, rent demand. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. Because you have to look at the area, you have to look at, like, what are the jobs around, like what is the rent, the growth of the place where you're buying. Value add potential, ability to increase rents and improve operations. So that's if you're buying a property, like all property, distressed property. So it's very important to see, okay, what would be the potential of the value add. Expense efficiency, economics of the scale matter, tax advantages, depreciation and cost segregation. We'll talk more about it in the following slides. Downside protection, must survive recession. So that's kind of in a way with what I just shared with our property when we purchased that. So you see, like, we were not able, we hold it for 2 years, but we were not able to hold on to that for any longer, and unfortunately we were forced to sell that. And velocity of the money, how fast cash can be redeployed into the next deal. So that's another thing, because, like, if you're putting money in there, so you want to see, okay, like how fast you can refinance to pull the money, because you want to make sure that the money is making money. So this is this is how wealthy, I mean, in the particular, this is how Grant Cardone, he's a billionaire. So this is how he thinks, this is how he looks at the deals. And income, scale, durability, and control, no speculations. So there's another thing, like, I want to stress a lot on that. Actually, you know what, like, even like with that deal, I'll tell you that the deal that I lost money, it's I think probably another thing that I should have put in here is the emotions versus the logic and the real facts. Because I'll tell you the story. What happened is, talking about, like, the cap rates. So I had a deal, and the group that I've been working with, I already been working with them I have like over 30 deals that I do with them, and they cap rate, like, if they share the cap rate, it's not going to be like that fancy and desirable. So they typically, they like to, like Grant talks about it, like over, like over sell to show like how well you can do it. But like with the real estate, I don't think it would be that case. He's, by the way, he's with the real estate, he's very, very disciplined. very disciplined. So that group that I'm investing, so typically the rate of return between like cash flow, let's put it this way, cash flow, projected cash flow between 3 to 5%. So, and I had that amazing deal, and I was sharing with one of my friends. I was like, okay, like we were talking about investment, and he asked me like, what do you invest? And I asked him what he invests in. So I told him that I'm investing with this group, and literally the opportunity was just like presented to me a couple of days ago, and the cap rate that we were going in was 3%. And then my friend goes to me, oh, this is so little. My guy gives me 8%. And I was like thinking, okay, you know what? All right, like let me take a look at what his guy does. You see, like that shiny object syndrome. And I went against my rules. I had like specific rules, but in that case, honestly, I have no idea. That's because of the emotions. I went against my rules. So surely I met up with his guy. He presented, I mean, like I reviewed, I thought that, I reviewed everything, but then again, with everything that was happening, the rate was going down, the property was amazing, the location was amazing, but like no one could have predicted what's going to happen with these rates. And surely I went with him, I invested with him, and that deal went bad, unfortunately. With the other group that I am in, yes, the cap rate is not that lucrative, but at least it's stabilized, it's stable with the cash flow, and it follows all of this wealthy thinking that I'm sharing with you. So just wanted, like that's just something to share. Anyway, so now let's talk about this case study in particular. So this is something that my client did purchase last week. Unfortunately, was not a great deal. He still decided to go with his partner, but I just want to show you again, like what I'm talking about, so you can see in numbers. So in this particular case, why going in cap rate can be misleading. So he purchases 6 units, 3 1-bedroom, 3 2-bedroom. Purchase price is $815,000. Down payment is $130,000. Loan is $693,000 with the 7.10% rate. So if we're gonna go to the right, the real annual expenses, and that's another thing. Like this is where many investors go wrong. So now you see like he is getting the mortgage at 7.1%, which comes out to 51,288. The property tax is 18,000. So that's another thing where he underestimated. Because here's the thing that I like to share. It's like whenever where you get the cap rate. So the cap rate typically you get like from the brokers that selling you the property, right? So the way they calculate it is how much the income generates. It's in net operating income, and then based on that cap rate, the value is determined of the property. So a lot of the times, the real estate brokers, they I'm not saying like, like they're putting wrong numbers. These are like misleading numbers, or a lot of the times the numbers are based on what the owner is paying. And, you look at it, okay, yes, the owner is paying this, you're doing your due diligence, this is all great, and then you basing your numbers off that. But this would be not right, and why would that be? For a number of reasons. First of all, the property tax. So it depending when the owner purchased this property. So if the owner purchased this property, let's say in that case, we're talking about now he's selling for 815,000. So let's say he purchased his property for 100,000 years and years ago. So his property tax is going to be very, very low. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be paying that. And by the way, I'll share another story from my own experience too. I didn't know Grant Cardone back then when I purchased my building in Brooklyn. That's basically what happened to me. So when I purchased the building, the real estate tax was $8,000. And I didn't know that. Listen, again, I didn't know Grant and like didn't know how to underwrite all of this stuff. And I guess didn't do my due diligence in the right way. So when I purchased this building, so before it used to be multi-use, like a 2-family house. And since the doctor converted, and then, well, because he converted, he still whatever like he did with this rate, he was still paying this low real estate tax. But then when I moved in there, I'm not a doctor, a lot different business. And then on top of that, I did all these fancy renovations. So surely a year later, the inspector came when we were closing out all the permits. He came, wow, this is so nice, this is so fancy, and all of that. And then I get a surprise bill in the email, in the mail, where my property tax went all the way up to 44,000. So you see, this is how important it is to not to use the pro forma that the real estate broker gives you, but to do your own homework, because the real estate tax will depend on the increase of the value at the base, increase of the value of the renovations, but then also the purchase price. Some basically it's not even some, many counties, they have this special calculator, so you can actually go to the county clerk and then you can use the calculator where you put like the purchase price, and then based on that purchase price, like what would be the property taxes. So it's very important to analyze and review all of these numbers, because otherwise, and that's exactly what happened in this case. If you're buying with the 6 cap rate, at the end of the day, it's going to turn out to less than that. Okay, so insurance, that's another one. So in his case, insurance $5,000. So this is another one because many investors, if they don't have a mortgage on the property, they try to save every penny. They don't even have insurance, so they buy some kind of a cheap insurance. I personally think that's not something that way you want to save money. You always want to underwrite the deal with assumption of that you're paying everything in the right way: the property tax, the insurance, the mortgage, the utility, like whatever you need to do. So and if you're putting all the numbers, underwriting with them, if that produces the positive NOI, that's a great deal. Because otherwise, if you're trying to make sense of the deal by trying to save money everywhere else, by cutting the insurance, the taxes, and all the other corners, that's not a great deal. Okay, so with the insurance, if that's another thing you need to look at it. If the whoever is selling you, if they had an insurance, how much they were paying for the insurance, like what was the coverage for, like especially like I live in Florida. Florida insurance is very, very expensive. Right now it went down, but a couple of years ago, the insurance was skyrocketing, and like you would see many deals that would underwrite the insurance with like a couple of $100 per door. But in reality, if we're gonna go all in with the right numbers, it might come out to like 1,000 or even some of them $1,400, because it depending on like location, the wind, the flood, and all this stuff. So this is something you definitely do not want to save the money on. And then in this particular case, the HOA fee, utilities. So basically the total expense came out to $80,688. And the rent he collects is $6,000 a month, so which comes out to $79,200. So now look at it this way. If he is paying $80,688 minus $79,200 that he collects, so he is in a negative cash flow.